The State of the Nation with Zororo Makamba.
If you live in Zimbabwe, you've definitely come face to face with corruption. Maybe you're in a fuel queue and someone said, they could help you get to the front for a small fee. Or maybe you're stuck at the border and someone says, hey, if you want to go through, leave a little something for me. Maybe it was on the roads. Remember those days when the cops would stop you on the roads? No, they'd go around your car looking for the smallest problem just so they can demand Mario Coke from you. And these are just the small cases of corruption. We know we have much bigger cases of corruption going down behind closed doors. Corruption is a cancer. We've let it spread on for far too long. We need to talk about it and act on it. Why is corruption a big issue? Well, here's why on this week's State of the Nation. Transparency International is a global agency that tracks corruption. Now, every year they do what they call the Corruption Perceptions Index. This is an indication of how bad people think corruption is in a country. This index tracks countries on a scale of 0 to 100. 0 means you're seen as very corrupt. 100 means you're seen as clean. Now, where does Zimbabwe score? We are at 22, which means we're seen as very dirty. In fact, out of 175 countries last year, we were 160. This is bad. Why? Well, for a number of reasons. First, corruption is like a silent tax. It adds to the cost of doing business. The IMF estimates that the cost of bribery around the world is between $1.5 and $2 trillion. That's about 2% of our global domestic product. Corruption also causes inefficiency. The guys at the border who deliberately make things hard for you just so that you can give them a little something. Second, say you're an investor. Now, before you go into any country, you ask this question. If I go in, will someone ask for bribes just so that I can get a license? There's a big chance of this happening. Well, trust me, you're going to take your money somewhere else. Nobody wants that. Now, one survey says this. 1 unit increase in corruption levels can reduce foreign direct investment per capita up to 11%. So corruption is bad for our economy. What do Zimbabweans think about corruption? Well, recently was a survey by the Afrobarometer. They asked Zimbabweans what they think. About 60% of Zimbabweans say they think corruption has increased over the past year. 25% of those surveys admitted to paying a bribe to access public services over the past year. Well, we know this is actually higher. I mean, how many people will actually openly admit it? They were also asked, do you think your country is doing a good job fighting corruption? 70% said no. This is an improvement from 80% in 2015. Still, it's far too high. Now, a lot of people think our public servants are corrupt. Our police, our MPs, our NGOs, the activists who are supposed to watch over the public servants to make sure they're not corrupt, they're corrupt too. Hell, even our pastors are corrupt. Everyone is corrupt. We have a problem, and we must start dealing with it. How? Well, it's not like we don't have a shortage of tools. We have the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission. We have the Crime Investigative Department Serious Fraud Squad. We have the Special Prosecuting Unit. We have the National Prosecuting Authority. All these institutions have the mandate to deal with corruption. So what should we do? Give these guys some real teeth. We've all read the AG's reports. Now, every year, she flips the lid on a lot of corruption, but she has no real powers to do more. At the moment, all she can do is just uncover the dirt. She puts it in a report and takes it to Parliament. Now, it's good news that we are debating laws to give her more power to act on her reports. This is important. And then we have ZAC. And now they have a new leader there. That's Lois Matanda Moyo. We also have 8 new commissioners. Now, all of them are going to need the tools to work with. We've had a few good laws recently that should help our corruption busters fight crime. Now, let's go through some of them real quick. Number 1, we now have the Statutory Instrument 143 of 2019. What does this do? It gives ZAC arresting powers. Before this, ZAC could only report their findings to the police. They couldn't arrest anyone. Number 2, we all know procurement processes where the real corruption is. But there's the Public Procurement and Disposable of Public Assets Act. Now, last year, the State Procurement Board was replaced by the Procurement Regulatory Authority of Zimbabwe. Now, this makes it harder for people to play the system. Number 3, there's the Money Laundering and Proceeds of Crime Act. Now, what does it do? If Zach or Zimra see you boarding around town with a big car, or if they check your account and see a big pile of cash, now they have the power to ask where you got your money. Now, we've seen this law being used already. The former boss of Zinara had his assets seized under this law. The police have what they call the Asset Forfeiture Unit. He's under investigation for fraud, so they froze his assets. Now, we also saw another Harare guy being asked to explain $1 million in his account. Number 4, we now have specialized corruption courts, 5 of them. Now, there's a big backlog of cases in our courts. The anti-corruption courts were supposed to make sure that corruption cases are tried quickly without being caught up in some queue. Well, we need to see this happening. Number 5, there's the Public Entities Corporate Governance Act. Now, this is supposed to clean up the way we run our parastatals. So, the tools are there. What we now need to see is the tools actually being used. We haven't seen it so far. It's not easy, we know, but even the president said so himself. This is what ED said recently. Once you get past the corruption in the police, the National Prosecuting Authority has to prosecute. Then there are also elements of corruption in the NPA. Then the case must go to the court, and there are also elements of corruption in the judiciary. So, the fight is wide and deep. It's a tough job, but it must be done. And as we've shown you, we don't have a shortage of corruption-fighting institutions. We have lots of them. What we want to see is political will to see them to work. Now, we need our prosecutors to be on point. We have had many arrests, but very little convictions. No wonder some are calling this catch and release. So, we need our prosecutors to have the resources to do their work. We also need to build our institutions to give them the space and freedom they need to do their work. It's time to walk the talk. We need our public servants to start disclosing their assets. That's what they promised. It's great that we have a new broom at ZAC. Lois Matandamoyo has a solid reputation as a tough judge. Ask any lawyer who's gone before her. But the fight against corruption is not about individuals. It's more than that. It's about institutions. Many of these institutions have been eroded for a long period of time. It's time to start rebuilding them. The new laws that have been put in place are a great step. Arresting powers for ZAC, making high rollers explain their wealth, fixing the procurement system, laws to clean up our parastatals. We now have the laws. We have the institutions. Now what people need to see is the law being used and being used without fear or favor. Corruption is killing our economy. It's time to step up and do what's right. It's time to bring out the broom. It's what our country needs.